Hello and welcome back to the A4Q Testing Summit Jubilee Edition, live from Marrakesh, Morocco. In this presentation, we have the chairman of IREB, Dr. King Lonrot, sharing his experience in a discussion about quality requiring attitude, the importance of digital design for software testing.
Thank you, Abby, for your kind introduction. Greetings from Germany to Marrakesh and all over the world. Yeah, in my talk, I want to present my experiences around digital design, software testing, and including the Bauhaus. Maybe you are aware of this picture. It's an art school from Germany, which is somehow related to the invention of industrial design. And for me, it's really important as a source of inspiration, but I will go into more details during my talk. To start with my presentation, I want to start with the end because I learned from architecture studies and universities that it is very important to learn something about perception of architecture to become a great architect. You must be able to see walls, rooms, living spaces, people, etc. in a special way to be able to become a great architect and to design and shape great buildings and landscapes. And in the same sense, my talk will be about the perception of quality in terms of related to software and digital solutions. But to start with the beginning, why is it important to talk about digital technologies, digital design, etc.? We already building software for almost 50 years. When you look at this picture, it's intended to show the history of software development in relation to the development of our technical possibilities and the expectations of our customers or users. For example, when we started developing software in the 1960s, there was little capable technology. It was really difficult, small CPU, small RAM size, small memory storage, even punch cards for programming machines. So the expectations were way beyond what technical things could deliver. There's one exception in history, 1969, where Apollo 11 landed on the moon, and there was a famous software engineer. Her name is Margaret Hamilton. She was one of the programmers of the Eagle, and people believed during that time that software is even capable of doing everything. And this somehow ended very early, but in the recent years, the expectations grow and our technical capabilities grow as well. But what's really important is in 2007, from my point of view, a very important thing happened. Apple introduced the first iPhone. If you like Apple or not, from my point of view, it was really a change in history, not only in terms of smartphones, but in terms of technology, because it enabled technology in a way that nobody expected, in the easy, usable, cheap way, so that people could really use and apply technology, digital technology, software all over the world. The success of the App Store and of all these smartphones, I think, is very clear with respect to this. But what happened in this point of time was also very important in terms of expectations, because after this point in time, we saw an explosion of technical capabilities. People were starting to talk about 3D printing, IoT, chatbots, cloud computing, virtual reality, everything, mobile computing, etc., etc. And what we saw there was an explosion of technical capabilities with an unclear relation to what our customers and users expected. And in this time, people started also to talk about digitalization and digital transformation, etc. And for me, it's very important to understand the differences, to understand digital design and its relation to quality in a better way. When we're talking about digitization, we are talking about digital data, which is something that we did for quite a while in our history. We created digital banking, for example, or the shift from the newspaper to the teletext. Maybe somebody already also uses these things, is an important thing. And this was enabled by computer technology and digital data. The second step are digital processes, which we call digitalization. This means there we started not only to use data, for example, for booking money, but we used technology for doing online banking. Or a very good example from my point of view is the step from the compact disc to the iPod, where we started not only to carry music on a device with us, but also to buy music over the internet. So we moved from analog processes to digital ones. And finally, the step of digital transformation, where we really start to change business models and ecosystems. For example, Spotify is not only a great tool of sharing music, it's also a great business model for artists selling their music. Or Twitter as another tool, it's not only another platform for sharing news, it is a different way of communicating between different communities, which is not always positive, as we hopefully everybody knows that Twitter is also responsible for not that good things, but it is a different way compared to sharing news over newspaper. And now, with all these developments in mind, you see that the scope, the ability to shape things is growing and growing. And when we come back to our history, our way of working, we see that most of our history, people were working in this time or had got an education where there was a gap between expectations and technical possibilities. And to be honest, software testing or testing at all is one of the oldest methods or oldest branches of software development. The oldest paper I found is from 1975, which deals with details of software testing. When you look at the next part, my profession, requirements engineering, is born 1977, which is, by the way, my birth year as well. So I'm as old as requirements engineering, 45 years. The next thing, interaction design, 1985, 1993, usability engineering, agile manifesto, 2001, business analyst body of knowledge dates back to 2005, which means that many of our methods are a bit older. But the important thing is not the fact that they are old, but the fact that they have been created in the time where there was a gap between expectations and possibilities. And this is very deeply embedded in the way that we are working. In the core, you see it in many titles: business analysis, requirements analysis, test analysis. It's always scientific analysis as a leading principle. And this makes its way deeply into the way we work. I typically try to separate the world into a simple picture with three layers. We talk about the environment, the context where stuff is developed. We talk about concepts, specifications, requirements, documents that we use as a kind of description of software and technology that we want to develop. And when we look at our roles and our way of working, we have a lot of roles that deal between the interface between environment and concepts and specifications: business analysis, interaction design, requirements engineering, etc., etc. Everything is about writing concepts. Then there are a lot of professions, roles, people that use these concepts to create technology and software engineers, database engineers, etc., etc. And even, by the way, testing is sitting in this part of the world. It takes concepts and specifications and performs quality assurance on software, on technology. And this separation is really well working if you are in a situation where you have clear expectations, clear understandings. But if you are going towards an unknown future, if you're doing transformation, you're doing innovative things, then design is the better way of working. And in almost 50 years, 60 years ago, people in the United Kingdom were doing a lot of research on the importance of design in terms of industrial and product design. And there is a important design researcher, S.A. Gregory, who said that it's important to understand that scientific way of working is problem solving in terms of finding out in the nature what exists, whereas design is a way of working, of inventing things that does not exist, which means science is analysis, design is constructive. And in this sense, when we move to in a world where we have unknown expectations and we're really doing innovative things, it is important to have design capabilities. And this is a first step that was already seen at the German Bauhaus. And now I'm trying to share some audio with you. This is an original tone from Walter Gropius. He was one of the founders of the Bauhaus, explaining why he founded the Bauhaus. I hope you can hear the audio well.
The arts and craft schools in Germany and in other countries in Europe were too platonic. People were learning on paper with brush and pencil, but didn't have enough access to the process of making these things. And so on one side was the industrialist who bought such design from these schools, and then he had to bring them to the whole process of industrialization. It was changed and changed. I thought that the designer should know the process, how these things are made, and so he has to be schooled first to understand the machine and the whole process of industry. So we had to bring, at least mentally, together the totality of the whole process.
What is, from my point of view, really important in this quote is the fact that in this time, we are talking about the 19th century, more than 100 years ago, there were already people who wanted to shape products, but they had no real access to the way of working, to the technology, to the technical understanding. And one of the main contributions of the Bauhaus and of other art schools in this time was that they started to teach people in arts and in technology. They were not really talking about design. This term did not really exist in this time, but they started to talk about art and technology, bringing both together so that people were able to shape things with technology. And this is, for many historians, the invention of industrial design, which we see nowadays as a very important discipline for shaping physical products. And the real innovation here is that people, designers, we're starting to learn how materials work, how production is working, how industrial processes are working. You must keep in mind that industrial design and architecture is, of course, always about building physical things, not software. But in the same sense, people needed an understanding how, for example, you can process metal or wood or other materials in a way that they can shape the product. It is not sufficient to create a prototype, for example, a chair that looks nice. The good designers must take into account how these things are produced at factories or at other production sites, so that they could create a product that was be able, that people can produce in a factory in a serial way with acceptable costs. And the important lesson from my point of view is that currently in the software and digital business, we are very much in the same situation that the production industry was 100 years ago. We have people that are great at developing concepts. They have a kind of platonic access to writing specifications, creating documents, etc., etc. And we have on the other side the software engineers, the technical people that want to work with this to produce good software. And of course, we're doing a lot of things, for example, in the agile movement to create cross-functional teams so that people work together and support each other. And this, from my point of view, is a real improvement. But a much more important improvement is doing the same thing that the Bauhaus here in this example did for industrial design. We want to achieve this with digital design. We want to educate people, and we want to have people that are able to think in terms of design and technology together, which means that in our way of doing work, of shaping roles, it's no longer working between the different layers for an environment and context, but also going into the technology. This is, at a first glance, a minor step, but when you compare it to the impact that the Bauhaus education had on product and industrial design, I believe that this extension of our understanding on how to design solutions, including technical understanding, is a very, very important step towards becoming better designers. And by the way, there is another discipline that is not part of this talk right now, but which is also, from my point of view, very important. We have also to rethink the way we build software. It's not only that we need technical experts, but we also need people that understand themselves as engineers that want to build and really construct technical solutions. There, I think we are much more advanced. We are talking about software architects, engineers, etc., etc. But just to get a complete picture, I'm convinced that we not only need digital designers, but engineers as well. A typical question that comes up during my presentations is very simple. Why do you talk about digital design and not about software design? And this, in my point of view, is a very first step towards understanding what's the difference between digital and software. My understanding of software is this picture. We are looking at a device, we are looking at a screen, we are looking at lines of code, etc., etc. Software is a great tool to achieve many, many things, to support business processes, etc., etc. But when I talk about digital, I'm not talking about data or something. I'm talking about the whole digital thing at all. This means that I'm talking about here about a woman who's taking a picture, maybe at an event, and wants to post it on LinkedIn, Instagram, or whatever platform you like. And the importance is not the software, but the importance is that this woman wants to share a picture and her experience, her current situation over a digital space, over a digital platform with her friends, colleagues, etc., family maybe. And this is a digital understanding of communication. It's not only about taking a picture, a very technical act, posting it on a platform, typing some messages, but it's mainly about sharing things. Therefore, this is more a digital perspective. I use digital as a tool, as a material to share and to do something with my friends, my colleagues, etc., etc. So when we talk about software, we are really talking about the device, about the algorithms, etc. When we talk about digital, we have a much larger scope because we are shaping digital, let me say, experiences, digital spaces, etc., etc. Now, coming to digital design for me means especially taking the responsibility for designing a solution. We have many people in software world, in software engineering, that are responsible, for example, for architecture, for testing, for documentation, for project management, for requirements, the requirements engineer, for analyzing the business. But for the overall design, we currently have no dedicated person. The next step, responsibility, of course, means that such a person is leading the process. And with leading, I really mean leading in the sense of management. This person is really responsible for the overall process from a design perspective. For me, this is a very important step because typically leading responsibilities goes together with project management. But project management always focuses on time and money and milestones and deadlines, and not so much on the shape of a solution, on the functionalities, on the features, etc. So here, the digital design wants to introduce a person, a personality that wants to take this responsibility to lead the building process. And the next thing, of course, digital design is not only technology, it requires to combine various perspectives, namely the business, the people, the users, the customers, the clients, and of course the technical capabilities. And this, in order to be able to do this, it is important to understand that digital is a kind of shapeable material. And this is also something that is at the first glance a contradiction, because digital zeros, ones typically mean that there is something untangible. But when you go back to my example of the woman taking a picture, her experience sharing the picture with her family or friends over, for example, Instagram, is a really tangible experience. That is something that she perceives that's important for her. She uses her smartphone to take a picture. And in this sense, we are shaping an experience, a situation, a community of people around this woman with digital material, with technologies. And in this sense, it is important for me to understand digital design. And as I already said, responsibility and leading are two important cornerstones of what I call a digital design attitude. Because digital design, we will come to this later, is not only a role from my point of view, it is also a profession. It is something that people want to be. In the same sense, people want to become industrial designers or architects. I believe there are many people out there who want to shape digital transformation, digital solutions, and call themselves digital designers. Just check out LinkedIn for digital design as a keyword. There are many people out there who start to call themselves digital designers because it's one of the best terminologies that they find to describe what they are doing. And in order to develop this attitude, there is one important thing to understand about design, which will become the important bridge to software testing as well. Design, from a theoretical perspective, is a so-called second-order activity, which means that typically I, as a designer, always design for other people. Of course, I develop software for my smart home at home, so I design for myself. But in a typical client-customer situation, a designer designs a product, a solution, a piece of software for other people. We call them users, clients, customers, etc., which means that we always see the world through the eyes of these people. A designer needs a lot of empathy, the ability to look through the eyes of other people to understand their needs, their way of using a software, their way of working. Many techniques that we use, from requirements engineering or business analysis, for example, task analysis, is a tool to look through the eyes of other people. And from a theoretical point of view, this perspective is always based on assumptions, because it's really difficult to go into the head of a person to look through her eyes. So these assumptions from a scientific point of view may not be correct. So the attitude of good designers is that they are always convinced that their ideas, thoughts, design solutions are always assumptions. And therefore, good design work has always an empirical component, which means that designers evaluate their assumptions. They try to define them as explicit as possible. We know this, for example, from usability testing. We assume that there is a good user interface, that it is usable, that it is efficient, etc. And to prove or improve the user interface, people start to use comprehensive usability tests, eye tracking, etc., depending on your project situation, on budget, etc. But the main point here is that testing in various ways is, for me as a designer, a very, very important evaluation tool. And when we look at what we believe is quality in software development, we typically go to ISO standards like this. We have tables, we have criteria, we have detailed attributes, etc., which are a very important and very scientific way of defining what quality means. But as I said earlier, I get a lot of inspiration from the design world. And this is a picture of Dieter Rams, a famous German designer who wrote a great paper about good design quality, etc. But now I do not want to stress his way of defining good design for product. I want to share with you a video what designers think about their product. Now I will start the video in a second. Please be aware that the person there is sometimes speaking in Japanese language, so you will see undertitle. But I want you to ask not only to look at the content, try to understand what the person is saying. I want to emphasize, want you to look how the person is talking about the device. By the way, the person is talking about a portable radio from the 1960s. So I will start my video now and hope you can understand it well.
その時に大学でデザインを勉強し始めて、でも彼はなんかデザインの教科書を作った人みたいな感じで、その教材としてブラウンの考え方とか、そういったものがありました。Actually, I have seen this product photo, but I have never touched. So very good. これ以上の完成されたっていうかなはないんじゃないですかね。中に配置されているそのチャンネルのチューナーのチューニングのグラフィックとか、そこを触るハードウェアとしてのインターフェースとか、アップルにはすごく影響を与えている。これがアイコンだと思うから。 iPod のダイヤルとかもそうだし、このそのスピーカーのレイアウトの穴のレイアウトも、グリッドシステム自体はもうグラフィックのその、文字のレイアウトでは非常に有名だったんですけれども、それをプロダクトというものでやっているということで、そういうデザイナーならでは、デザイナーだったら必ずそうしたいと思う、その美の願望が全部ここに入っているので。
What I find very impressive is how this person is, by the way, a very famous Japanese product designer. He when he started to talk about this radio, he said he never touched it, and you can really I can really see in his face that he's really happy to see this radio for the first time as a physical thing. And I hope you recognize that he described many quality aspects of this product. And I mean, we maybe you think, hell, this is a simple old radio. Why is this old man talking about this in this way? And my answer to this statement typically is, well, he really has a sense of quality. He has a sense and attitude of quality. What is a great design? I also never saw this product in real life, but I saw a different brown product designed by Dieter Rams, and you can really see the quality. You can really perceive how great the design, the functionality, the interface is. And by the way, he also mentioned that this radio was an inspiration for Apple. It was there are many sources that support this, that this radio was the inspiration for the iPod, for the form and the shape, etc. And what we wanted to achieve with our digital design movement is that we educate people and find people that want to talk in the same way about the quality of digital solutions, about digital products. And I think there is an important bridge between what testing, what quality assurance is doing, and what digital design wants to achieve. And to express this attitude of quality, there is a list of 10 principles for good digital design, which we believe is a basis for discussing what quality means in terms of digital solutions. You can briefly read them. I will go to each principle in the next minutes and explain their meaning more detailed. When you want to get more information on the principles, you can also go to the IREB website on LinkedIn. There we published an article on the 10 principles that explain them with additional examples in detail. So let's start with the first one. Good digital design is useful and usable, which of course means that we create things that really provide value. This sometimes may be a no-brainer, but when I look at many solutions in my part of the world, many functionalities provided that are not really useful or usable. They are simply created for the purpose of creating a piece of software. Every company, for example, needs an app. If it makes sense or not, people create an app. And we already talked about this a little bit. Testing the usefulness with real users is, of course, an important aspect of usability testing. And hardening the usability with iterative tests is, of course, also an important thing. And here I want to start with the simple statement that as a designer, I want to have people in my team that are able to define and perform these careful usability tests. It is important for me, from my attitude for creating good products. I hope you remember the statement that a digital designer is responsible for the design of the solution, for the whole design. So I need people that support me in creating useful and usable products, not only by carefully thinking and designing usable interfaces, talking to the user, gathering their requirements, but also in terms of performing extensive usability tests, hardening the usability. Everybody who's an expert from this domain is aware of the fact that good usability requires testing, iteration and iteration over iteration to really find all the defects and really create a usable and useful interface. The next principle, good digital design, is elegant and aesthetics. This is typically something that people have in mind when they start to think about design. there is a cliche in the world that design is always something about visual things, beautiness. There are nail designers, by the way, hair designers. So people that are not familiar with the design community have a very, very easy view. Design makes things beauty. And by the way, in the history of software development, there were also many people who said, oh, well, we develop a user interface and in the end we use a designer to make it more beautiful. And this is something that is, from my understanding, a real misunderstanding. People, for example, like Dieter Rams or Johnny Ive from Apple, the former chief designer there, they try to incorporate elegant and aesthetic products, designs, services, by the way. You can also talk about the elegance of a service, of a authentication screen. There are good ways of authenticating people logging into a device. There are good ways of designing a two-factor authentication, which from my understanding has also something to do with elegance and aesthetics. But there, it is really important that people not only think it is a kind of painting, making colors to an interface, drawing something, but that elegance and aesthetics is something that must be incorporated from the very beginning into the design and the building of a piece of software. And when I think of projects, my testing teams are usually the first users that are really able to detect weaknesses in the elegance and aesthetics of design. I'm not the 100% visual person. Typically in our teams, they are, of course, interaction and visual designers who are very much focused on creating elegant and aesthetic user interfaces. But as I said in the beginning, design is a second order activity, which again means that people, of course, think they design beautiful and aesthetic solutions. But I got many positive inspiration and ideas from my testing teams that said, oh yeah, maybe this looks interesting, but on a daily basis, hell, when you see this interface 20 times a day because you are doing regression tests, you have a very different attitude toward the beautiness and the elegance of a user interface. So the exchange between testing people and design people in terms of elegant and aesthetics design, from my point of view, is a very important part. And in the same way, the functional aspects of a process, at the first glance on a piece of paper, on a whiteboard, processes typically look very efficient, very useful. But when you're really doing the details, the tests, and here I really appreciate the work, at least in my project teams from the testers, that they say, hey, hell, I did this process 20 times, and I guess this step is not really good, useful. You have to improve it in this way. And for sure, there are many other ways to incorporate testing people much earlier in the process. For example, when you create concepts, people say invite the testers so that they can start to work on test cases, deriving test data, etc. And here you have an important interface where test people and design people should work together because of their different perspectives. They bring in fresh sights, different understanding, and of course, because of their role and way of working, a different attitude towards the software, especially the teams that are doing regression testing. And they really have a different attitude towards a piece of software. And they, from my point of view, are a really good source of information there. The next principle is good digital design is evolutionary. I think everybody in the software world learned the lesson that it is not possible to plan everything up front. I mean, the agile movement is an outcome of this understanding. But evolutionary solutions is not only the recognition of the fact that you cannot design everything at once. You see that solutions are developing, are evolving over time. For example, when you visit the Amazon web shop 20 years ago, it looked completely different. There are some similarities in terms of the layout, but there are many different features, different ways of changing it. And when you look at operating systems, for example, from Android OS, they are changing from time to time. And it is, of course, difficult to anticipate evolution. But what I saw from good testing people is they are able to explore large possibility spaces, which means they are able to think in alternatives. They, of course, want to find the defects or want to find scenarios that nobody has thought about, to maybe find defects or flaws in the software. But this ability, this way of thinking is very impressive from my point of view, because good testing people are able to explore large spaces, seeing activity diagrams, seeing flows that nobody thought of, that may lead to errors in the software that, of course, improve the software later on. And I really appreciate this way of thinking and found it very useful to discuss with people from the testing world how to think about alternatives, how things can develop, how things can evolve, just to think about possibilities, how my solution may change in the future. Then the next thing, good digital design is exploratory, which means we typically do not know in advance which solution is good, of course. So we need to evaluate our ideas, our concepts, our solution, our processes. And there I see two very important bridges between design and testing work. Working on test cases is, of course, something that, at least from my experience, starts way too late in development processes. And when I get the chance to invite test people early on in my team, it was really beneficial from my point of view to start to think about how to test a solution. For example, a search interface or a certain business process. When people started to look at our prototypes on our UI screens, or even on technical prototypes that people developed, it was really, really beneficial and a good way of exploring and understanding alternatives, thinking about new ideas, simply by asking the question, how would I do quality assurance on this prototype, on this user interface? What would be the user's reaction on this, or that? The next principle is good digital design focuses on the person as a whole. As I already said, that digital design is not only about the software, about the device that the woman here is using. It's about the whole experience, the whole idea of creating a social network where people can publish their pictures, share experience, etc., etc. And in this sense, it's of course part of the designer's attitude to try to look as comprehensive as possible on a person. But of course, taking this perspective every day, a fresh look every day, is really difficult. But when you get testing people, for example, or software people on board, it's a very good chance to get a fresh look. So when people started to learn about our project for the first time, this was, for me, one of the most important moments when we, so to say, did the onboarding process, for example, of the testing team, because our concept was in a state where people started to think about starting development, onboarding more people, etc., etc. And this is, for me, a good way to get people on board with a fresh look on the perspective, on a different understanding of a solution, on getting additional feedback channels for the design, so that it is possible for me as a designer to question again what our assumptions, our idea was when we started to design the solution here. The next principle I want to talk about is the one that good digital design really anticipates the effects of its result, which means that we not only want to put a piece of software into the world that does something, but also try to understand what will be the impact of the software on many, many different things. For example, on the company, on the way people worked. For example, the corona pandemic forced many of us into the home office scenario and into the way of working using Teams or Zoom or other online meeting tools. And this really changed the way people perceived their way of working. Many people in my filter bubble now want to work from home and really understood that this is possible. To be honest, I used online tools like this way before the pandemic, but my attitude towards working from home really changed there, because they had a completely new situation. This is, of course, very difficult to anticipate early on, but the testing developing the way quality assurance is done on a piece of software is, for me, a first real-world experiment, of course under controlled conditions, of a piece of software. So it is really important and useful to test the software, to look what's doing with the testers, how they start to test the software, how they behave, how they use the process, what are shortcuts, etc., etc. And of course, the ability of testing people, again, to explore large spaces of possibilities, which is typically used for thinking about test coverage, but which is also important in the sense that they may have a different perspective on what a piece of software can do inside an organization, how working is changed, how attitude towards the software is changed, etc., etc. Some more principles to go. The next one is digital design. Good digital design respects data protection and data security. Of course, security is also a technical thing. If you're using weak technology, weak encryption technology, etc., you have an issue in your piece of software. But when you start to design solutions, safety, security, data protection, from my point of view, really starts in the moment where you think about your processes, your data structures, etc., etc. A very simple example from my point of view is it really necessary in a web store to store credit card data, to store payment data? There are so many payment providers that can, of course, organize the payment for me and for my system. So it's not necessary for me to store payment data inside my piece of software, which improves the security in the sense that my solution, my product, my software is not that attractive for people who want to steal credit card data. And in this sense, data protection and data security really starts with the design of the solution. And of course, intensive testing improves safety and security in various perspectives. It finds defects, it finds security holes, etc., etc. And I really appreciate also working with security specialists, security testing people early on in the project, because they have great experience where typical security holes, security issues may arise. That helps to improve my design of the solution. And of course, another important detail, when people start to work on test cases, they of course have to work on test data. And when I met in many projects, when I saw the test scenarios and the test data collections, I got a very clear view that certain information stored inside our software is not really necessary, because it's a busy work, always asking for example, for address data, etc., etc. And talking with testing people about test data gave me much insights on the necessity, and of course talking with our customers, our clients, and showing them, hell, here, this is the data we will store in our solution. Do you really think it's necessary that we need all this detailed information? And of course, our concepts, our prototypes can show this, but the clear and down-to-earth representation of test cases with many test data sets makes this impression much more tangible. Finally, good digital design is sustainable and creates sustainability. This is, again, important to think which way of working do we need, which hardware do we need, etc., etc. And what I love about testing is that testing people typically have a very down-to-earth and systematic way of working. They are measuring, they are simply recording the defects, they are saying this is not working, and this makes especially sustainability very, very tangible. It's, from my point of view, this is really a talk on its own, but here it's important that sustainability is a very, very important part of the attitude of good digital design. Then two last important, more philosophical principles. Good digital design appreciates analog and digital means equally, which really means, is it really necessary to put everything into software? There are many, many good analog solutions, like a notepad, like many other ways, like physical meetings. So again, this down-to-earth look and systematic way of working is important for me from a testing perspective, again, to understand if that something that we developed in a digital world is really useful. And finally, good digital design understands that digital technology is not the hammer that can be used everywhere. new technologies, for example, blockchains, are looking for interesting problems. And again, here I really appreciate the critical and neutral perspective of the testing people in terms of the usefulness and usability of digital solutions. So to conclude my talk, for me, it's really important that you understand that digital design is not a role. We will maybe we will see digital designers in project as a role, but this is not the intention. We have enough roles in IT. We have product owners, developers, team members, etc., etc. What we want to do is to build bridges between existing roles and show how people can work together in terms of design competence. And roles can be designed in a way we need them for the project circumstances. And typically, when people think about testing and design and digital design, they are typically seen as different bubbles. And the idea of digital design is really the idea of integrating things, integrating especially people, showing the bridges. And the goal of my talk really was to show you that my attitude as designer for developing great products has a lot to do with the things that people, especially from the testing roles, can offer with their abilities, with their way of working. And I hope I was able to show you a different perspective on the things that testing people do and convinced you that being able to design good solutions has a lot to do with perception. And I think testing people bring a lot of features and capabilities in terms of perceiving quality, and digital design people are natural partners of testing people. And even more, I believe digital design is also an interesting way of working, an interesting profession for testers. And so in the same sense, I hope you got the idea that perceiving quality of digital solution is something very important to become a great digital designer. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm really looking forward to questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the insightful look into both the history of software architecture and how design works with software development and software testing. I think you have mentioned a couple of points that will leave good topics for conversations later on in the day. I thank you again for your insightful presentation. It seems like we do not have any questions as of yet, but if we do receive any, we'll be sure to pass them on. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can watch any of our streams throughout the day. They're available on our website and our social media channels. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.